Humanity at this time were on the brink of destruction, with hardly any new resources to sustain human civilizations. The sovereign colonies would successfully construct 3 new markers based on the data pulled up from Michael Altman's research. The new markers seemed to have the same properties as the original marker, however with one notable difference. The original was completely black. These ones would possess a red hue. Dr. Yiondo would send a report to General Ambrose Caden of the sovereign colonies, stating that this was purely a cosmetic difference, not indicative of a flaw. The markers would be taken to 3 separate sites following these reports for further study, being Aegis 7, Asperia, and Crema. Upon activation, the markers would begin to emit a highly complicated rhythmic pattern across a wide band of frequencies, from actual sound waves through the electromagnetic spectrum to alpha, delta, and theta brainwaves. The scientists and researchers would note that it mostly seems inert and harmless, aside from some slight interference with communication equipment, and they would continue with their studies. They would take the symbols covering the marker on Aegis 7 and begin trying to decipher it, until reaching a breakthrough. The symbols on the skin of the markers were a set of instructions to create a microbial life form. The doctors would begin observing the specimen. However, even when placed into a bath of rich nutrients, the blob-like creature would remain dormant, with all attempts at getting a response from it failing. The doctors, scientists, and researchers would soon begin to give up, until Dr. Clifton had entered the room and had managed to shed some dead skin into the containment unit, due to not properly decontaminating himself before entering the chamber. The creature sprung into action, absorbing the skin into its own mass as if it were recombinating the cells held within. The creature began self-replicating the cells and mutating them. The doctors soon discovered that this life form they had created was a recombinative life form, a creature that reconstructs DNA. However, it would seem that this life form only targets a specific vector, with that being dead flesh, reconstructing it to assume a new purpose, a new form. Later on that day, the researchers outside the labs were moving the red marker to another location, moving it past the labs, which had an effect on the specimen. It ceased its function almost immediately. The scientists working at the time would file complaints about the interruption in the necrotic flesh experiments. This event, however, led the researchers into a major discovery. The marker emits a field around itself that shuts down the recombinant creature, or necrotic flesh. They would soon name this the dormancy field. Others would dub it the dead space field, as the necrotic creature cannot seem to function within it. Little knowing of what role this discovery would play in the days to come. The following day, 2 doctors would become engaged with the lifeform, with it attacking them. The doctors Clifton and Hogan would be then placed in quarantine to better understand if they were to be affected by the attack, or if they would recombinate like the rest of the experiments. Interestingly enough, instead of remaining in the room with the doctors to recombinate them faster, it had fled into a ventilation duct, where it would begin to replicate itself throughout the entire ventilation system. A day later, the scientists, doctors, and researchers would begin to complain that they cannot sleep, seeing things when they do. One of the many tricks the marker possesses, perhaps knowing of the imminent plight these humans would have to face in the days to come. This would lead them into becoming even more stressed than usual and irritable, which would eventually lead them into developing a mental illness called depression. A few of them had begun to suspect something had been taking place within the ventilation system, as there were signs of a buildup of some kind. The day after the report, the maintenance team had inspected their suspicions to find something pulsating within the ducts, blocking the system from functioning as expected. The team would report back stating that the mass is growing throughout the airways, and a disturbing finding, the mass is entirely made of an organic material. Sometime after this on the same day, the doctors observing Dr. Clifton and Hogan would find that the creature had indeed infected them, and it was spreading fast. Coursing through their veins was the necrotic cells themselves. Dr. Clifton would shortly die after the doctors had diagnosed him, and over the following hours, they would start to see something truly horrifying. The body of Dr. Clifton had begun to slowly transform, first with the chest expanding, like the doctor was taking in a deep breath. The doctors would look closer at Clifton. When they see it, something appears to be happening under his skin, which looked to be something moving around. Recombination had begun, with the cells destroying vital organs, molding them together to create a new form, to assume a new purpose that would be made clear to the doctors when the transformation would be complete.